The day Isaac Garrett found a woman humming in his kitchen. He genuinely believed he had finally lost his mind to the endless Wyoming silence that had been his only companion for the past 3 years. He stood in the doorway of his ranch house, dust from the trail still clinging to his boots, staring at the impossible sight before him. A young woman with auburn hair twisted into a practical braid moved around his kitchen with the kind of easy grace that suggested she belonged there. Though he knew with absolute certainty that when he had left at dawn to check the fence line, his house had been as empty as it always was. She was humming something soft and melodic, something that made the rough wooden walls of his home feel warmer somehow. And she was stirring something in a pot that smelled better than anything Isaac had managed to produce in his entire life. "Madam," he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended after a day of talking to nothing but his horse and the occasional coyote. She turned, and Isaac found himself looking into the most unusual eyes he had ever seen, a gray-green color like the sage that grew wild across his property. She did not scream or drop the wooden spoon she was holding. Instead, she smiled at him as if they were old friends reuniting after a brief separation. "You must be Isaac Garrett," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent he could not quite place, something Eastern maybe, refined but not pretentious. "I hope you do not mind. I took the liberty of making supper. You did not have much to work with, but I found some salt pork and potatoes in your cellar, and there were wild onions growing near your creek." Isaac removed his hat slowly, trying to make sense of the situation. "I do not mean to be rude, madam, but who in the hell are you, and how did you get into my house?" "My name is Rose Vaughn," she said, turning back to the stove as if that explained everything. "And your door was unlocked. You really should be more careful about that. There are all sorts of unsavory characters traveling through Wyoming territory these days." He almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Here was this woman breaking into his house, and she was giving him advice about safety. "Miss Vaughn, that still does not explain what you are doing here." She was quiet for a moment, her hand stilling on the spoon. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its brightness. "I was hoping you might need help. A housekeeper, perhaps, or a cook. I am quite good with chickens, too, if you keep any, and I can manage a vegetable garden. I do not eat much, and I would not require much in the way of wages. Just a place to stay and perhaps a small amount for necessities." Isaac set his hat on the hook by the door and moved closer, studying her more carefully now. She was young, probably no more than 22 or 23, but there was a weariness around her eyes that spoke of hard experience. Her dress was well made but worn, the kind of garment that had seen better days. Her hands, he noticed, were red and chapped, the hands of someone used to work. "Where are you from, Miss Vaughn?" "Boston, originally. More recently, I was living in Cheyenne." "That is a long way to travel looking for work. There must be plenty of positions available in a city like that." Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "There were complications. I needed to leave." Isaac had been running his ranch alone for 3 years, ever since his parents had decided Wyoming winters were too harsh and returned to Missouri. He had stayed because he loved the land, loved the wild beauty of it, but the loneliness had become a physical thing, a weight he carried with him through every silent meal, and every evening spent watching the sun set over the mountains with no one to share the sight. He knew he should probably ask more questions, should probably send this strange woman on her way, but instead he found himself saying, "The supper smells good." Rose turned to look at him again, and this time her smile reached her eyes. "It will be ready in about 20 minutes. You might want to wash up." He did, pumping fresh water from the well and scrubbing away the day's grime while his mind raced. This was insane. He knew nothing about this woman except her name and the fact that she could cook. For all he knew, she could be running from the law, or she could be planning to rob him blind the moment he fell asleep. But when he came back inside and saw her setting the table with the mismatched plates he had been eating off for years, arranging them with a care he had never bothered with, he felt something shift in his chest. They sat down to eat, and the first bite of her stew nearly made him groan aloud. It was simple fare, nothing fancy, but it was seasoned properly and cooked with attention, and it tasted like home in a way his own cooking never had. "This is excellent," he said. "Thank you. My mother taught me. She said a woman who could not cook was like a man who could not ride." "Your mother sounds like a practical woman." "She was. She died 5 years ago." "I am sorry." Rose nodded, taking a small bite of her own food. "What about your family, Mr. Garrett? Are they still living?" "My parents are back in Missouri. They tried ranching out here for 8 years, but after my father's accident, they decided they had had enough. I bought them out 2 years ago. I have a sister too, married to a banker in St. Louis. I have not seen her in 4 years. You must get lonely out here by yourself." It was such a direct observation that Isaac did not know how to respond at first. Finally, he said, "Sometimes. But I love the land, I love the work, it is worth it." "Is it?" The question hung in the air between them. Isaac found himself looking at this stranger across his table and wondering if she could see through him as easily as she seemed to. If she could see the nights when the silence became so oppressive, he would saddle his horse and ride for hours just to hear the sound of hoofbeats, or the mornings when he would wake and, for just a moment, forget that there was no one else in the house. "Most days," he said finally. They finished the meal in comfortable silence, and then Rose stood and began clearing the dishes. Isaac moved to help her, and she did not protest, which he took as a good sign. They worked together at the basin, him washing and her drying, and it struck him how natural it felt, how right. "You can stay," he said suddenly. Rose looked up at him, her hands pausing on the plate she was drying. "What? If you need work and a place to stay, you can have the job. There is a small room off the kitchen that used to be my mother's sewing room. It has a bed and a stove. You would have your privacy. I would pay you $20 a month plus room and board. Mr. Garrett, you do not know anything about me. I know you can cook, and I know you are desperate enough to walk into a stranger's house and start making supper in the hope of earning a place to stay. I know you have good manners and you work hard. That is enough for now." Rose set down the plate and the towel, and Isaac saw her hands were shaking slightly. "I left Cheyenne because a man I was working for tried to force himself on me. I struck him with a poker and ran. I do not know if he reported me to the law or not, but I could not take the chance of staying." The words came out in a rush, as if she had been holding them back with great effort. Isaac felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and immediate. "Did he hurt you?" "Not badly. I got away before he could do much damage, but I lost my position and my lodgings, and I had no references I could use. I have been traveling for 3 weeks, taking whatever work I could find, but no one wants to hire a woman alone without references or family." "What is his name?" Rose shook her head. "It does not matter. I just want to move forward." Isaac wanted to press, wanted to ride to Cheyenne and find the man who had put that look in her eyes, but he forced himself to respect her wishes. "Then we will not speak of it again unless you choose to. But my offer stands. You can stay, and you have my word that you will be safe here. I would never harm you or allow anyone else to. Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me. Maybe that is why, or maybe I am just tired of eating my own cooking." It was weak humor, but it made her smile, and that felt like a victory. Rose stayed. That first night, she moved her small bag into the room off the kitchen, and Isaac lay in his own bed on the opposite side of the house, staring at the ceiling and wondering what he had just done. But in the morning, when he came into the kitchen and smelled coffee brewing and saw Rose standing at the stove with the dawn light streaming through the window, he knew he had made the right choice. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both new and oddly comfortable. Isaac would rise before dawn and go out to tend to his cattle and horses, to mend fences and check water sources, and do the 1,000 small tasks that kept a ranch running. Rose would have breakfast ready when he came in, and then she would spend her day cleaning and cooking and organizing the house in ways he had never managed. She started a vegetable garden near the house, planting seeds she had somehow acquired in town, and she befriended his chickens until they followed her around like devoted pets. But it was the evenings Isaac found himself looking forward to most. They would sit together after supper, sometimes talking, sometimes comfortable in silence, and Rose would tell him about growing up in Boston, about her father who had been a ship's captain and the exotic places he had visited, about learning to cook from her mother in their small but tidy kitchen overlooking the harbor. In turn, Isaac found himself opening up in ways he never had before, telling her about his dreams for the ranch, about the beauty of a Wyoming winter that could kill you if you did not respect it, about the satisfaction of bringing new life into the world each spring when the calves were born. 2 weeks after Rose arrived, Isaac rode into Tropic, the nearest town, to pick up supplies. Tropic was barely more than a wide spot in the road, a collection of rough wooden buildings strung along the main street like beads on a string. The general store, the saloon, the land office, the church, all of it rough and raw and still finding its footing in the wild Wyoming landscape. The state was still young, having achieved statehood just a few years prior in 1890, and towns like Tropic were still defining themselves. He was loading sacks of flour and sugar into his wagon when he heard a familiar voice. "Isaac Garrett, heard you hired yourself some help." He turned to see Tom Barnes, who owned the neighboring ranch to the south. Tom was a good man, a hard worker who had always been fair in their dealings, but he was also the kind of person who knew everyone's business and was not shy about sharing his opinions. "Word travels fast," Isaac said evenly. "Pretty woman traveling alone shows up at a bachelor's ranch. People are going to talk. Where did she come from? East. She needed work and I needed help around the house." Tom nodded slowly, his eyes sharp. "She running from something. That is her business and mine. Fair enough. Just be careful, Isaac. Woman like that, there is usually a story, and sometimes those stories come with complications." Isaac felt his jaw tighten. "I appreciate your concern, Tom, but I can manage my own affairs." Sure, just being neighborly." Tom tipped his hat and walked away, but Isaac could feel the man's curiosity like a weight on his shoulders. He finished loading the wagon more quickly than he had planned and headed back to the ranch, Tom's words echoing in his mind. He knew there would be talk. In a place like this, where entertainment was scarce and gossip was currency, the arrival of a young woman at his ranch was bound to cause speculation. But what bothered him more was the realization that he did not care. Let them talk. Rose had brought something to his life he had not even realized was missing, and he was not about to give that up because of wagging tongues. When he arrived back at the ranch, Rose was in the garden, her skirts tied up out of the way as she knelt in the dirt, pulling weeds. She looked up as he approached, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, and smiled at him. Something in his chest tightened at the sight. "How was town?" she called. "Loud," he said, climbing down from the wagon. "And nosy." Her smile faded a bit. "People were asking about me, some." "It is a small community. They are curious." Rose stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "I am sorry if I have made things difficult for you. You have not, and even if you had, it would not matter." The words came out with more force than he had intended, and Rose looked at him with surprise. "Mr. Garrett, Isaac, please. I think we are past formalities, do not you?" "Isaac," she said softly, "I do not want to cause you trouble. The only trouble you have caused is making me realize how empty this place was before you arrived." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Rose's eyes widened, and for a moment, Isaac thought he had gone too far, had revealed too much too soon. But then she smiled, really smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Help me finish weeding," she asked. They worked together in the garden until the light began to fade, their hands moving through the soil side by side. And Isaac found himself thinking that this simple moment of shared labor under the vast Wyoming sky, was as close to perfect as anything he had ever experienced. That night after supper, they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of sage and pine from the mountains to the west. "I have been thinking," Rose said quietly, "about what you said earlier. About this place being empty before I came. I should not have said that. It was too forward. No, I am glad you did, because I have been feeling the same way. This is the first place I have felt safe in a very long time, the first place that has felt like home." Isaac turned to look at her. In the starlight, her face was soft, her expression open and vulnerable. "How long were you traveling before you found this place?" "3 weeks on the road. But in a way, I have been traveling much longer than that. Since my mother died, I have felt lost, like I was just drifting from place to place without any real destination. My father was already gone by then, lost at sea years before. I thought I could make a life for myself in Cheyenne, but—" She trailed off, her hands tightening in her lap. "You do not have to talk about it if you do not want to. I want you to know. I was working as a housekeeper for a banker named Crawford. His wife had died the year before, and he needed someone to manage his household. It was a good position at first. He was proper and professional. But then he started drinking more, and he would come home and say inappropriate things. I tried to ignore it, but one night he came into my room. He grabbed me and tried to kiss me, and I panicked. There was a poker by the fireplace, and I hit him with it. He fell, and I ran. I do not even know if I hurt him badly or not. I just knew I had to get away." Isaac felt rage building in him again, hot and fierce. He deserved worse than that. Maybe. But I was terrified the law would side with him. He was a respected man, and I was just a servant. So I took what little money I had saved and left in the middle of the night. I bought a ticket for the train heading west and got off at the first small town that looked like it might have opportunities. That was how I ended up in the area. I walked from there, asking at ranches if anyone needed help. Yours was the 5th place I tried. I am glad you kept trying." Rose looked at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "So am I." They sat in silence for a while longer, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. Finally, Rose stood and said goodnight, and Isaac watched her go inside before allowing himself to acknowledge the truth that had been building in him for days now. He was falling in love with her. It was foolish and reckless and probably a terrible idea, but there it was, as undeniable as the mountains on the horizon. The weeks passed, and summer deepened into the full heat of July. Isaac and Rose fell into an easy partnership that felt like it had existed far longer than it actually had. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, understanding without being told when he would need extra food packed for a long day on the range, or when his silence at breakfast meant he had been up half the night with a sick calf. He learned her moods as well, recognizing when she needed space to work through whatever memories were haunting her, and when she needed company and conversation to keep the ghosts at bay. One afternoon, Isaac came back to the ranch earlier than usual to find Rose standing on a chair in the kitchen, trying to reach something on the top shelf. The chair wobbled, and without thinking, he rushed forward and caught her around the waist, steadying her. "Careful," he said, his hands firm on her hips. Rose gasped and looked down at him, her face flushed. They froze like that, Isaac's hands on her waist, her hands gripping his shoulders for balance, their faces just inches apart. He could feel the warmth of her through the fabric of her dress, could smell the lavender soap she used, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them, suspended in this small space. "I was trying to reach the good plates," Rose said breathlessly. "I thought we could use them for supper tonight." "Why?" "Because it has been 2 months since I arrived, and I thought we should mark the occasion somehow." 2 months. Had it really been that long? It felt both like forever and no time at all. Isaac realized he was still holding her and carefully helped her down from the chair, his hands lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Let me get them for you," he said, his voice rough. He reached up easily and retrieved the plates his mother had brought from Missouri, the ones with the blue willow pattern that had always been saved for special occasions. When he handed them to Rose, their fingers brushed, and he felt the contact like electricity. "Thank you," she said softly. That evening they ate supper on the good plates, and Rose had somehow managed to make a cake with the limited supplies available. A simple yellow cake with sugar glaze that tasted like celebration. They talked late into the night, longer than usual, as if neither wanted the day to end. And when Rose finally stood to go to bed, she paused by Isaac's chair and, without saying anything, rested her hand briefly on his shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it felt monumental, an acknowledgement of something growing between them that neither was quite ready to name. August brought heat that shimmered off the land in waves and made even the horses lazy. Isaac worked harder than ever, preparing for the fall roundup that would come in a few months, making sure his fences were solid and his stock was healthy. Rose kept the house cool as she could, cooking early in the morning before the heat became oppressive, and spent the hottest part of the afternoon in the shade of the porch with mending or reading from the few books Isaac owned. One evening, as a rare rainstorm rolled through and brought blessed relief from the heat, they stood together on the porch watching lightning split the sky in brilliant forks. "It is beautiful," Rose breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "It is," Isaac agreed, though he was looking at her rather than the storm. She glanced at him and caught him staring. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Rose took a small step closer and Isaac felt his heart begin to race. "Isaac," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I think I am falling in love with you." The words were simple and direct, so completely Rose that Isaac felt his chest constrict with emotion. He had been holding back, trying to be respectful, trying not to pressure her or make her feel obligated to return feelings she might not share. But now, with her standing here offering him her heart with such brave honesty, all his restraint crumbled. "Rose," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I have been in love with you since the day I found you in my kitchen, humming while you made supper as if you had always belonged here." Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Really, really. I did not know it right away, or maybe I did and was too much of a coward to admit it. But yes, I love you. I love your strength and your courage and the way you make this empty house feel like a home. I love the sound of your humming in the morning and the way you fuss over the chickens. I love that you are not afraid to get your hands dirty or to speak your mind. I love everything about you." Rose let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then she was moving toward him, and he was reaching for her, and they came together in a kiss that felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. She tasted like rain and sugar from the lemonade they had been drinking, and her arms came up around his neck as his hands found her waist, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not as my housekeeper, but as my wife. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are here, knowing that we are building this life together. Will you marry me, Rose Vaughn?" Rose was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so wide it looked like it might hurt. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Isaac Garrett, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it, and the rain continued to fall around them, washing the land clean and cool. The next morning, Isaac rode into Tropic to speak with Reverend Matthews, the circuit preacher who served the scattered community. The Reverend was a kind man in his 50s who traveled between several small settlements, bringing both spiritual guidance and news from the wider world. "Marriage, you say?" Reverend Matthews said, his eyebrows rising. "That is wonderful news, Isaac. I had heard you had a young lady staying at your ranch. When would you like the ceremony? As soon as possible, if you can arrange it." "I can do it this Sunday after regular service, if that suits you. Will you have witnesses?" Isaac hesitated. He had not thought that far ahead, but he wanted to do this properly, wanted Rose to have a real wedding even if it was small and simple. "I will ask the Barnes family. Tom and I have had our differences, but they are good people." "Excellent. And Miss Vaughn, she is agreeable to this arrangement." "She is the one who suggested we marry," Isaac said, which was not exactly true but close enough. "Good, good. You know, Isaac, I have been doing this work for 23 years, and I have married couples who had known each other their whole lives and couples who met just months before. The length of the acquaintance does not determine the strength of the marriage. What matters is the commitment you make and the work you put in. If you love this woman and she loves you, that is foundation enough." "I do love her, Reverend, more than I thought possible." "Then I will see you both on Sunday. And Isaac, congratulations. You deserve happiness." Isaac rode from there to the Barnes ranch, where he found Tom working on repairing a section of his barn. The older man straightened when he saw Isaac approaching, wiping sweat from his brow. "Isaac, what brings you by?" "I wanted to invite you and your family to my wedding on Sunday. Rose Vaughn has agreed to be my wife, and we would be honored if you would stand as witnesses." Tom's face went through several expressions before settling on something like approval. "Well, I will be damned. Congratulations, Isaac. That is wonderful news. So you will come?" "Of course we will." "Mary will be thrilled. She has been wanting to meet your Miss Vaughn properly. A wedding is just the excuse she needs." Tom paused, then added more seriously, "I am happy for you, Isaac. I know I gave you some grief when you first took her in, but anyone can see she has been good for you. You look happier than I have seen you in years." "I am happier than I have been in years. She is an extraordinary woman." "Then you are a lucky man. We will be there Sunday with bells on." Isaac rode home feeling lighter than he had in ages. When he arrived back at the ranch, he found Rose in the kitchen as usual, but this time she was wearing one of his mother's old dresses that she had altered to fit her. It was a simple blue calico, nothing fancy, but on her it looked beautiful. "I thought I should have something nice to wear for the wedding," she said a bit shyly when she saw him staring. "I hope you do not mind that I went through your mother's things." "I do not mind at all. She would be happy to know her dresses are being put to good use. You look beautiful, Rose." She blushed and smoothed her hands down the skirt. "I am nervous. Is that silly? I want to marry you more than anything, but the idea of standing up in front of people and making those vows feels so momentous." Isaac crossed the room and took her hands in his. "We can do this however you want." If you would prefer something private, just the two of us and the Reverend, we can arrange that instead." "No, I want to do it properly. I want witnesses and vows and all of it. I just want it to be perfect." "It will be perfect because you will be there." Sunday came bright and clear. One of those late summer days when the sky was so blue, it almost hurt to look at, and the air carried just the first hint of the autumn that was coming. Isaac dressed in his best suit, a dark wool number he had bought for his father's funeral years ago and had not worn since. Rose wore the altered blue dress and had woven wildflowers into her hair, and when she came out of her room that morning, Isaac thought she looked like something from a dream. They rode together into Tropic in Isaac's wagon, sitting close on the bench seat, their shoulders touching. Rose's hand found his, and he held it tightly, feeling the calluses on her palm that matched his own, the evidence of hard work and shared purpose. The church was small, rough-hewn logs with a simple wooden cross above the door, but someone had decorated the inside with more wildflowers, and the Barnes family was already there waiting, along with a handful of other neighbors Isaac knew by sight if not by name. Mary Barnes, Tom's wife, rushed forward to embrace Rose as soon as they entered. "My dear, you look lovely. I am so happy for both of you." "Thank you, Mrs. Barnes. It means a great deal that you came." "Nonsense. We would not have missed it for the world." Reverend Matthews stood at the front of the church, his Bible open in his hands, and he smiled warmly as Isaac and Rose approached. "Are we ready?" "We are," Isaac said firmly, his hand tightening around Rose's. The ceremony was simple and traditional, the words worn smooth by generations of use, but no less powerful for their familiarity. Isaac spoke his vows clearly, his eyes never leaving Rose's face, promising to love and honor and cherish her for all the days of his life. And when it was Rose's turn, her voice was steady and strong despite the tears streaming down her face as she promised the same. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, and before these witnesses, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Matthews said. "Isaac, you may kiss your bride." And Isaac did, cupping Rose's face in his hands and kissing her softly, sweetly, aware of their small audience but not caring, because in that moment nothing existed except the two of them and the promises they had just made. There was a small celebration afterward at the Barnes Ranch, with food and drink, and well wishes from neighbors who were genuinely happy to see Isaac settled. Rose was nervous at first, meeting so many new people at once, but Mary took her under her wing and made introductions, and soon Rose was laughing and talking as if she had lived in the community for years. Isaac watched her from across the yard, marveling at how easily she fit in, how natural she looked here among these people who were slowly becoming their community. Tom came to stand beside him, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand, and offered one to Isaac. "To your marriage," Tom said, raising his glass. "Thank you, Tom, and thank you for being here today. It meant a lot to both of us." "You chose a good woman, Isaac. Mary has been talking to her for the past hour and she is quite impressed. Says Rose has a good head on her shoulders and a kind heart. That is high praise coming from Mary. Rose is all that and more. I count myself the luckiest man in Wyoming. Just make sure you treat her right. Women like that do not come along often." "I know. I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure she never regrets saying yes." They drank in comfortable silence, watching the gathering, and Isaac felt a sense of peace settle over him. This was his life now, no longer solitary but shared, no longer empty but full of possibility. When the sun began to sink toward the mountains, Isaac and Rose said their goodbyes and climbed back into the wagon for the ride home. Rose leaned against his shoulder, exhausted but happy, and Isaac drove with one arm around her, holding her close. "Mrs. Garrett, he said softly. "MMM. I like the sound of that. Rose Garrett." She smiled against his shoulder. "So do I, though it will take some getting used to. We have plenty of time for that." They arrived home as the last light was fading from the sky, and Isaac helped Rose down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her up into his arms. "Isaac, what are you doing, carrying my wife over the threshold? It is tradition. You are going to hurt yourself. I am not that light." "You are perfect," he said firmly, and carried her through the door and into their home. That night, they came together as husband and wife, and it was sweet and tender and occasionally awkward in the way of first times. But it was also perfect because it was them. Two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen to build a life together. Isaac held Rose afterward, her head resting on his chest, her hair spread across the pillow like copper silk, and felt more complete than he ever had before. "I love you," Rose whispered into the darkness. "I love you too. Always." The months that followed were some of the happiest of Isaac's life. Fall came with its brilliant colors and cool nights, and he and Rose worked side by side to prepare for winter. They preserved vegetables from the garden, put up jams and pickles, made sure the barn was tight and the firewood was stacked high. Rose proved to be as capable with ranch work as she was with housework, helping him move cattle to winter pasture, and showing no fear of the hard physical labor involved. When the first snow fell in late October, they stood together on the porch watching the flakes drift down, and Rose's eyes were bright with wonder. "I have never seen anything so beautiful," she said. "Wait until January. Then it will just be cold and inconvenient." She laughed and swatted his arm. "Do not ruin it for me. Let me enjoy the romance of the first snow." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Enjoy it all you want. I will keep you warm." Winter settled in hard and cold, as it always did in Wyoming, but Isaac found he did not mind it as much as he usually did. There was something wonderful about being snowed in with Rose, about the long evenings by the fire while the wind howled outside, knowing they were safe and warm and together. They would sit close, Rose often working on mending or knitting while Isaac read aloud from whatever book they had. And sometimes they would just talk, sharing stories and dreams and plans for the future. It was during one of these evenings in late December that Rose set aside her knitting and said, "Isaac, I need to tell you something." He looked up from the book he was reading, immediately alert to the tone in her voice. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine, actually. I am expecting a baby." The words seemed to echo in the quiet room. Isaac stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she had just said. "A baby? Yes. I am about 3 months along, I think. The baby should come in early summer. A baby. His baby. Their baby." Isaac felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost overwhelmed him. Joy and fear and wonder all mixed together. He set aside the book and crossed to Rose, kneeling in front of her chair and taking her hands. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be. I have missed my monthly courses, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. Mary Barnes helped me understand what was happening when I asked her about it last week." "You told Mary before you told me." "I wanted to be certain before I said anything. I did not want to get your hopes up if I was wrong." Isaac pressed his face against her hands, feeling the sting of tears. "A baby, Rose, that is wonderful. That is the best news I have ever heard. You are not upset." "Upset? Why would I be upset? I know we have not been married very long. And winter is a hard time to be pregnant. I worried you might think it was too soon." Isaac looked up at her, cupping her face in his hands. "Listen to me. This is not too soon. This is perfect. You are giving me everything I never dared to hope for. A wife I love, a child on the way, a real family." How could I be anything but overjoyed? Rose's eyes filled with tears, and she smiled through them. I am so glad. I have been so nervous about telling you. Do not ever be nervous about talking to me. We are partners in this, in everything. Whatever comes, we face it together. They held each other for a long time, and outside the wind continued to blow and the snow continued to fall. But inside they were warm and safe and full of hope for the future. The winter seemed longer than usual, but that might have been because Isaac was impatient for spring and the arrival of their child. He watched Rose carefully, probably too carefully if her exasperated comments were any indication, making sure she did not overwork herself and insisting she rest more often than she wanted to. I am pregnant, not an invalid, she would say, but he could tell she was touched by his concern. As her belly grew and the life inside her became more visible, Isaac found himself overwhelmed with protectiveness. He would sit with his hand on her stomach in the evenings, feeling the baby move and kick, and wonder at the miracle of it all. Spring came late that year, the snow reluctant to release its hold on the land, but when it finally did, the world exploded into green and gold. The calves were born, filling the pastures with new life, and Rose's garden, planted as soon as the ground could be worked, began to flourish. In early June, on a warm evening when the light lasted forever, and the air was sweet with the scent of wild roses, Rose's labor began. Isaac rode hard to fetch Mary Barnes, who had offered to help with the birth, and then spent the longest night of his life pacing the kitchen, while Rose worked in their bedroom with Mary at her side. "First babies take their time," Mary called out to him at one point when his pacing must have become too loud. "Go outside and do something useful. Check on the horses or count stars or something. You are making Rose nervous." Isaac went outside as instructed, but he did not stray far from the house. He sat on the porch steps, his head in his hands, and prayed harder than he ever had in his life. Let them both be all right. Let Rose be all right. I will give up anything, do anything, just let her be all right. As dawn began to break over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Isaac heard a new sound. A baby crying, thin and angry and absolutely perfect. He jumped to his feet and rushed inside, stopping at the bedroom door. Mary appeared, her sleeves rolled up and a smile on her tired face. "You have a son, Isaac, and Rose did beautifully. Come meet your boy." Isaac entered the room on shaking legs. Rose was propped up on pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face exhausted but radiant, and in her arms was a small bundle wrapped in a blanket his mother had made years ago. She looked up as he approached, and her smile was like the sun coming up. "Come meet our son," she said softly. Isaac sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had stopped crying and was staring up at him with unfocused dark blue eyes, and Isaac felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered, reaching out to touch one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his, and Isaac felt tears streaming down his face. "Rose, he is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Rose asked. They had discussed names over the winter, going back and forth between different options but never quite settling on anything. Now, looking at his son, Isaac knew exactly what felt right. "James, for your father, James Garrett." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You would do that?" "Your father was by all accounts a good man, and I would be honored to have our son carry his name. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect. Hello, James. Welcome to the world, little one." Mary bustled around the room, cleaning up and making sure Rose was comfortable, and then she tactfully excused herself to give them some privacy. Isaac sat with his wife and son as the morning light grew stronger, marveling at the small miracle in Rose's arms. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For coming into my kitchen that day, humming as if you belonged there, for taking a chance on me, for giving me this." He gestured at James, at Rose, at the life they had built together. "I should be thanking you. You saved me, Isaac. You gave me a home when I had nowhere else to go, and you loved me when I thought no one ever would again. You gave me everything. Then we saved each other." James began to fuss, and Rose adjusted him to nurse, and Isaac watched in wonder as his son latched on and began to feed. This was his family. His wife and his son in the house he had built, on the land he loved. It was more than he had ever dared to hope for. The weeks after James's birth were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. The baby was healthy and hungry, and seemed to have his days and nights confused, which meant neither Isaac nor Rose got much sleep. But Isaac would not have traded those bleary-eyed mornings for anything. The times when he would pace the floor with his son on his shoulder while Rose got a few precious hours of rest. As summer progressed and James grew stronger, they fell into a new rhythm. Rose would work with the baby tied to her in a sling Mary had shown her how to make, and Isaac would take over childcare duties in the evenings, walking with James around the ranch and telling him about everything they saw, even though the baby was far too young to understand. "You see those mountains," he would say, pointing west. "Someday I will take you up there. We will go camping and fishing, just the two of us, and I will teach you everything my father taught me." James would gurgle or sleep or cry, but Isaac kept talking, wanting his son to know his voice, to feel secure and loved. By the time autumn came around again, James was sitting up on his own and showing signs of his personality. A sunny disposition most of the time, but with a stubborn streak that reminded Isaac strongly of Rose. They celebrated James's first Christmas quietly, just the three of them, and Isaac carved a simple wooden horse for his son, who promptly put it in his mouth and drooled all over it. "I think he likes it," Rose said, laughing. "He likes everything right now. Wait until he is older and more particular." "Do you think we will have more?" Rose asked, watching James play with his new toy. "More children? Do you want more?" "I think I would like James to have siblings. I was an only child after my brother died young, and I was often lonely. I would like him to have brothers and sisters to play with." "Then we will have more," Isaac said, pulling her close. "As many as you want." The years passed in a blur of work and joy and the everyday challenges of raising a family. 2 years after James was born, Rose delivered a daughter they named Sarah, who had her mother's auburn hair and her father's quiet determination. And 3 years after that came another son, Peter, who was loud and boisterous from his first breath. The ranch prospered under Isaac's careful management and with Rose's help. They expanded the herd, improved the house, and became respected members of the community. Isaac served on the school board once one was established, and Rose was known throughout the area for her kindness and her willingness to help anyone in need. James grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did, always eager to help with chores and learning everything Isaac could teach him. Sarah was bright and curious, forever asking questions about everything she saw, and Peter was the daredevil, always climbing things he should not and giving his parents heart attacks on a regular basis. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac and Rose stood together on the porch where they had first confessed their love, watching the sun set over their land while their children played in the yard. James, now 9, was teaching 5-year-old Sarah how to rope a fence post, while 2-year-old Peter toddled after them, laughing with delight. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Rose asked, leaning against Isaac's shoulder. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like forever. In the best way. Do you ever regret it? Taking in a strange woman you found in your kitchen. Isaac turned to look at her, this woman who had changed his entire life, who had filled his empty house and empty heart with more love than he had ever imagined possible. There were threads of silver in her auburn hair now, and fine lines around her eyes from years of smiling and squinting into the sun. But to him, she was as beautiful as the day they met. "Not for one single second," he said firmly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rose Garrett. You and our children, this life we have built together, it is more than I ever dreamed of." "I love you," she said softly, the same words she had spoken countless times over the years but which never lost their power. "I love you too. Always." They kissed, tender and familiar, and still full of the passion that had brought them together, while their children played and the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. This was their life, built from nothing but hope and hard work and love, and it was perfect in all its imperfect reality. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. There were hard winters and dry summers, times when money was tight and they had to make difficult decisions about the ranch. There were illnesses and injuries, the inevitable sorrows that come with living. When James was 12, he broke his arm falling from a horse, and Isaac sat with him through the night while the boy fought his fever, feeling every bit of his son's pain as if it were his own. When Sarah was 8, she came down with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter, and Rose barely left her bedside for a week, nursing her back to health through sheer determination and love. But there were so many more moments of joy. James's first successful roundup when he was 15, working alongside his father like a true partner. Sarah's delight when she learned to read, devouring every book she could get her hands on. Peter's antics that kept them all laughing even when they should have been stern. Birthday celebrations and holidays, visits from neighbors and the rare trip into Cheyenne for supplies and a taste of city life. Isaac and Rose grew older together, their bodies bearing the marks of hard work and time, but their love only deepening. They knew each other's thoughts almost before they were spoken, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room. They still made time for each other, still sat on the porch in the evenings talking and watching the stars, still held hands like young lovers even after years of marriage. When James turned 20, he fell in love with a young woman from a neighboring ranch, a practical girl named Emma with a quick laugh and a good head for business. Isaac gave his blessing readily, seeing in Emma someone who would be a true partner for his son, someone who understood the demands and rewards of ranch life. They were married in the same small church where Isaac and Rose had wed, and watching his son make those same vows, Isaac felt the circle of life completing itself in a beautiful way. Sarah, always the bookish one, surprised them all by announcing at 17 that she wanted to be a teacher. Rose supported her immediately, recognizing her daughter's passion for learning and her gift for explaining things to others. It meant Sarah would have to go to Cheyenne for training, and the thought of their daughter so far away was painful. But Isaac and Rose had always believed in allowing their children to follow their dreams. "We will miss you terribly," Rose said the day they took Sarah to the train station, her eyes wet with tears. "I will come home every chance I get," Sarah promised, "and I will write every week. This is not goodbye forever, just goodbye for now." She was true to her word, writing long, detailed letters about her studies and her life in the city, and coming home during school breaks to share everything she was learning. She eventually returned to Tropic to teach at the small school there, wanting to give back to the community that had raised her. Peter, true to his wild nature, announced at 18 that he wanted to explore more of the country before settling down. It was the hardest thing Isaac and Rose had to accept, watching their youngest son ride off with little more than a bedroll and a few dollars in his pocket, but they understood his need to find his own path. "He will come back," Rose said, watching Peter disappear down the road. "He has too much of you in him to stay away from this land forever." And she was right. 2 years later, Peter returned, older and wiser and ready to settle down. He had seen Denver and San Francisco and countless towns in between, and he had decided that nowhere compared to home. He took over a section of the ranch Isaac had been planning to sell, and began building his own herd with the money he had saved from various jobs during his travels. As Isaac and Rose moved into their 60s, they began to slow down, allowing their children to take over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch. James and Emma ran the main herd, living in a house they had built on the north section of the property. Peter managed his own operation on the south section. Sarah taught during the school year and helped out during summers and breaks. The ranch that Isaac had once run alone was now a family enterprise, and he was proud of what they had all built together. On a warm evening in July, Isaac and Rose sat on their porch, now worn smooth by decades of use. Isaac was 72, his hair white and his body slower than it once was, but his mind still sharp. Rose was 69, her auburn hair now silver but her gray-green eyes still as bright and perceptive as ever. "You remember the day I found you in my kitchen?" Isaac asked, reaching for Rose's hand. "Of course I do. I was so frightened, but I tried to hide it by acting confident. I thought if I could just prove myself useful, maybe you would let me stay." "I knew I was going to let you stay the moment I tasted your cooking," Isaac said with a smile. "But truly, it was the humming that got me." This house had been so silent for so long, and then suddenly there was music in it again. There was life. "I was humming because I was nervous. It is what I always did when I was scared. My mother used to hum while she cooked, and it made me feel closer to her to do the same. Whatever the reason, I am grateful for it. That sound brought me home when I did not even know I was lost." Rose squeezed his hand, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the sounds of their family drifted up from the various parts of the ranch. James's children, their grandchildren, were playing somewhere nearby, their laughter bright and clear in the evening air. Emma was calling them in for supper. Peter was working late, as usual, the sound of his hammer ringing as he built a new shed. "We did well, did we not?" Rose asked softly. "We did better than well. We built something that will last long after we are gone, not just the ranch, but the family, our children and their children, all of them knowing how to work hard and love deeply, because that is what we taught them. I never imagined I could be this happy. When I was wandering around Wyoming, desperate and alone, I thought my life was over before it had really begun. And then I found you." "We found each other," Isaac corrected gently. "And we built this life together one day at a time." They sat until full dark, then made their way inside to their own supper. The house was quieter now with just the two of them, but it was still full of love and memories. Every corner held a story, every room echoed with laughter from years past. That night, lying in bed with Rose curled against his side as she had been for 43 years, Isaac thought about the journey that had brought them here. The loneliness he had felt before Rose arrived seemed like a dream now, something from another life. She had filled not just his kitchen but his entire world, had given him purpose and joy and a reason to wake up smiling every morning. "Rose," he whispered into the darkness, thank you for humming in my kitchen that day." He felt her smile against his chest. "Thank you for asking me to stay. Not just to stay, I asked you to fill it forever, The kitchen, the house, my life, and you did. We filled it together. And they had. With children and grandchildren, with laughter and hard work, with the everyday moments that made up a life well lived. With love, above all else, the kind of deep, abiding love that grew stronger with time rather than fading. As Isaac drifted off to sleep, he thought about that young man he had been, coming home to an empty house and finding an unexpected guest. He thought about how terrified and brave Rose had been, walking into a stranger's home and offering her services because she had nowhere else to go. He thought about the moment he knew he loved her, and the moment he married her, and the 1,000 moments since then that had confirmed his choice again and again. Their story could have been so different. Rose could have kept walking and never stopped at his ranch. He could have sent her away instead of offering her a place to stay. But fate and fortune and perhaps a little bit of providence had brought them together. Two lonely souls who found in each other exactly what they needed. The seasons continued to turn, and Isaac and Rose grew older but never apart. They celebrated their 50th anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren who were just beginning to arrive. The party was held at the ranch, with the whole community turning out to honor a couple who had become pillars of the area, known for their fairness, their generosity, and their enduring love for each other. Speech. Someone called, and the crowd took up the cry. Isaac stood slowly, Rose's hand in his, and looked out at the assembled faces. So many people they had known for decades, who had watched their family grow and their ranch prosper. So many who had been touched by Rose's kindness or benefited from Isaac's steady leadership. "I am not much for speeches," he began, his voice still strong despite his years. "But I will say this. 50 years ago, I was a lonely man living in an empty house, going through the motions of life without really living. And then one day I came home and found this woman in my kitchen, humming as she made supper, acting like she had every right to be there. I could have sent her away. Maybe I should have. But instead, I asked her to stay. Best decision I ever made." The crowd laughed and applauded, and Isaac squeezed Rose's hand before continuing. "Rose filled my empty house with love and laughter. She gave me children who have become my pride and joy, and she has been my partner in every sense of the word for 50 years. She has made me a better man than I ever could have been alone. So on this anniversary, I want to say thank you, Rose, for humming in my kitchen that day. Thank you for staying. Thank you for filling my life forever." There were tears and cheers, and Rose stood and kissed him, and the party continued late into the night with music and dancing, and the kind of joy that comes from genuine community. As the years advanced and Isaac's health began to fail, he never lost his gratitude for the life he had lived. When his children worried and fussed, he would wave them off and say he had no complaints. He had lived longer than he had any right to expect, and he had been blessed beyond measure. On a quiet morning in early spring, when Isaac was 78 and the world was coming back to life after a long winter, he woke before dawn as he always had. Rose was still sleeping beside him, her breathing soft and steady, and he took a moment just to watch her, memorizing her face in the gray light. He rose carefully, not wanting to wake her, and made his way to the kitchen. His body was slow and stiff, but his mind was clear as he put on the coffee and stood looking out the window at the land he had loved for so long. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. He heard Rose's footsteps behind him and turned to see her in the doorway, wrapped in the shawl she always wore in the mornings. "You should have woken me," she said, coming to stand beside him. "You were sleeping so peacefully. I wanted to let you rest." They stood together at the window, watching the sunrise as they had done thousands of times before. Isaac put his arm around Rose's shoulders and she leaned into him, fitting against his side as perfectly as she had for 50 years. "It is a beautiful morning," Rose said softly. "It is. They all are when I am with you." She looked up at him and he saw tears in her eyes. "Isaac Garrett, you are an old romantic. Only with you, Rose, only ever with you." They stood together as the sun climbed higher, warming the land and bringing light to the world. And Isaac thought about that day so many years ago, when he had come home to find a woman humming in his kitchen. How that single moment had changed the entire trajectory of his life. He thought about asking her to stay, about falling in love, about building a family and a legacy that would outlast them both. He thought about how empty his life had been before Rose, and how full it had been since. How she had taken his loneliness and transformed it into joy, how she had filled not just his kitchen but every corner of his existence with her presence, her love, her music. "Rose," he said quietly. "Yes, my love. If I could go back and live my life over again, knowing everything that was to come, I would not change a single thing. Not one moment. It has all been perfect because it has all been with you." Rose's tears spilled over, and she turned to embrace him, holding him tightly. "I love you, Isaac. I have loved you from the moment you offered me a place to stay when I had nowhere to go, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you. Forever." They held each other as the sun continued to rise. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life of beauty and meaning. The house around them was full of memories. The land outside was full of promise, and their hearts were full of gratitude for the gift of having found each other. Isaac lived another 5 years, remaining active and involved in the ranch until the very end. When he finally passed, peacefully in his sleep with Rose by his side, it was with the knowledge that he had lived a full and happy life, that he was loved and would be missed, and that he was leaving behind a legacy that would continue for generations. Rose grieved deeply, as anyone would after losing a partner of 55 years, but she was surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of whom carried forward the love and values that Isaac and Rose had instilled in them. She lived another 7 years, remaining sharp and engaged until the end, and when she finally followed Isaac into whatever lay beyond, it was with a smile on her face and his name on her lips. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the vast Wyoming sky they had both loved. Their children made sure the graves were always tended, and as the years passed and the family grew, new generations would come to visit, to hear stories about the lonely rancher who found a woman humming in his kitchen and asked her to fill it forever, and the brave woman who said yes. The ranch continued to thrive, passing down through the family, each generation adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation that Isaac and Rose had built. The original house still stood, carefully maintained and cherished, and sometimes visitors would swear they could hear humming coming from the kitchen, soft and sweet and full of love, because some stories do not end with death. Some stories live on in the land, and the people who tend it, in the lessons passed down, and the love that continues to grow and multiply with each new generation. The story of Isaac and Rose was one of those stories, a testament to the power of chance and choice, of courage and kindness, and of a love that truly did fill an empty space forever, leaving behind a legacy that would never fade. Their great-great-grandchildren would eventually work the same land, ride through the same pastures, and watch the same sunsets over the same mountains, carrying forward the story of how it all began on that long-ago day when a lonely rancher came home to find an unexpected guest in his kitchen. And they would understand, in the way that comes from living close to the land and close to family, that the humming their ancestor heard that day was not just a nervous habit or a way to pass the time. It was the sound of home calling to someone who was lost, and of that lost soul answering back, and of two people finding in each other the missing piece that made them whole. That was the real magic of Isaac and Rose's story, the reason it was told and retold through the generations. Not just that they found each other, but that they built something lasting from that finding. They took their chance meeting and transformed it into a lifetime of partnership, into children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all benefited from the love they shared. They took an empty house and filled it with laughter, an empty heart and filled it with joy, an empty future and filled it with hope. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for from a life well lived. To love and be loved, to build and create, to leave the world a little better than you found it, and to know, as Isaac and Rose both knew at the end of their long lives, that it had all been worth it. Every struggle, every joy, every quiet moment and grand adventure, all of it worth it for the privilege of having found each other and chosen to walk through life hand in hand. The story of the lonely rancher and the humming woman became legend in that part of Wyoming, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them, that courage can take many forms, and that true love, when nurtured and tended, can grow into something that outlasts any individual life and becomes part of the very fabric of a place and a family. It was a story worth telling, and so it was told again and again, a gift from one generation to the next, proof that even in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, beauty and love and hope could flourish, and that sometimes all it took was one person brave enough to hum in a stranger's kitchen, and another brave enough to ask them to stay.